This episode of Bluegrit Podcast is brought to you by Police One Academy, a Lexipol solution.
This is Victor Avila from ICE. We are shot. We are on the highway to Querétaro, Mexico. We've been shot and attacked on the highway.
Bluegrit Podcast. We're back this week.
Yeah, welcome back.
I was gone a little bit.
You were gone. Yeah, like you left me.
I feel like I was missed.
I had to man the ship for like 2 episodes.
I felt like I was missed. JW called you me one day.
Well, I felt divorced. It's only just begun.
It worked well.
Well, I missed you.
It worked well. Missed y'all.
I'm glad you're back.
I'm glad to be back. It's good to be missed sometimes.
Well, before we dive off into this really intense number 2 episode, we're going to talk about that in just a second, the hiccup that we've had. You guys subscribe to the channel, hit that download button. We're going to pop it up here, there, right here. Hit that subscribe button and again, download these episodes. That's how they measure our job performance and how we do on the podcast. So please download the episodes and the subscribe to the channel. That's how we kind of judge how me and Clint are doing on the podcast.
Watching the analytics of you alone the last few weeks.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. Thank you. So before we begin, we've got a really special guest on today. Victor, this is his second time being on. We want to go ahead and throw that out there. He was on a couple weeks ago, and what we did not know, we're kind of learning through this process. Austin had a pretty severe storm. And we had a pretty powerful episode, and what we did not know is that when the power surge here happens in our headquarters and the power goes off, our soundboard here in the podcast headquarters, it reverts back to the stock settings. So our badass episode did not capture any sound.
But have no fear, this one is going to be more badass than the first one.
Yeah, round 2 is going to be pretty it's going to top the chart. So, I want to tell you thank you for coming back and doing round 2. Man, it's a pretty, and I'm telling y'all better strap in and get ready cuz this is a pretty awesome story.
Yeah, and it's a crazy story. And I hope if you've selected an episode to listen to, I hope you listen to this episode with Victor because there's a broader picture of some of the concerns and the craziness of his story. Not just somebody that's served our country in a law enforcement role and been injured, but there's so many other issues that Victor and I were talking about him even before we came on, the stuff that he faced, and it's a crazy story, but I appreciate you coming back. It's you've got a lot going on, and for you to take time to come back and
well, it's to me, it's important, especially what you guys do, and thank you for everything that you guys do and the association because this is how important. I wanted to come back because I want people to be able to hear not just the story, but like you said, it's the overwhelming ripple effect that the story has because it has a lot of phases to it. You know, we could just talk about the incident itself, then border security. Then all the implications of national security and everything that we're actually living through right now.
Yeah.
So, Victor Avila.
Yes, sir.
Tell us a bit about you, where you grew up at, how you got introduced. For those that don't know, he's got a law enforcement background. Tell us about you, where you grew up at.
Grew up in El Paso, Texas, born and raised there. Got introduced to law enforcement as a El Paso police explorer. When I was, I think, 15 or 16, which is the explorers are attached to like the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, a family member, got me in there, and I loved it because they gave you a uniform. You actually rode along with the police officers. You helped them out at the parades, and you got a lot of training, little firearms training, all that good stuff. Plus, what it did for me, it really exposed what a police officer does on a daily basis, that first of all, they're real people with real problems and real issues, just like everyone else.
Yep.
And on top of that, have to deal with a stressful occupation. And so I grew up respecting the police and having even a little fear of the police, as my parents taught me to be that way. And so I really wanted to see that other side. And it was very, at first, I remember, kind of overwhelming, being with the police officers, and they're going to have lunch. Oh, they eat. When you're in a you grew up in this sheltered environment. I grew up in a good home with 2 parents, not a lot, but we're happy, and not having law enforcement in our lives as far as crime. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, because my first assignment from graduating college, El Paso has a lot of heavy presence of federal law enforcement, and everybody's like, you graduate from UTEP with a criminal justice degree. What are you going to be? I'm going to be a Fed. Well, it's easier said than done. Some people get to do it. I actually did an internship when I was at UTEP, and I don't even think they offer that anymore. And you did a whole semester at the port of entry with, back then, U.S. Customs Service.
Oh, wow.
They give you a uniform, and you shadow a CBP inspector. Well, now it's CBP inspector. Back then, U.S. Customs inspector. Every 2 weeks at different ports of entry. Boy, talk about.
Yeah, he's on the liability too.
Boys,
now,
and then me growing up, going in, back and forth from the border, it was cool to see the other side of the inspectors, of how they inspected the vehicles, all of that. But
kind of
behind the scenes, especially when they got the seizures, and that's the first time I saw the first response by a special agent. Showed up in an unmarked vehicle, jeans and a t-shirt, badge and gun. I'm like, who is this guy? And they're like, oh, well, that's the special agent. He takes over, and he's going to open the investigation and takes interrogation and all that good stuff. And I'm like, well, that's the guy I want to be. And they're like, yeah, get in line. There's about 1,000 of us trying to get that job.
He slides up, and James Bond music's playing.
Right. He looked cool. I was impressed. And I started off as a state parole officer, which now, looking back at my career, it really shaped me into really understanding the criminal element and culture, because I was 22 years old. And first of all, I quickly learned that if people go to prison, they don't stay in prison. Everybody thinks, oh, you went to jail, that's it. You're never going to see them again. No, they're going to be out, and they're going to be out in your community, and they're going to be shopping next to you at Walmart and at the restaurant next to you. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, as an agent, and you probably have those stories too, bumping into people like this at stores and on your personal time, and they're amongst us. So I got the exposure of the gang element. I became a gang intelligence officer, the sex offenders, the worst of the worst, right? I supervised those, and I really saw the other culture of when you announce to the family, your loved one is going back to prison, and they're like, oh, so he's not going to be here for this Thanksgiving. In my family, that's a tragedy, right? And so here, it's accepted. Being part of that criminal justice system, to them, it's normal, because we don't have new people. We do have, but not many, committing new crimes all the time. It's the same, the recidivism. We have the same people committing the crimes mostly. Same thing that's happening. We talked a little bit about what's happening in New York. It's the same group of people committing crimes over and over again. And so that exposed me. And then one day, these 2 federal probation officers showed up to the office. They had a case in common from state parole and federal probation. And they show up in suits, and I'm like, who are these people? Oh, they're federal probation officers. And they basically do what we do, but at the federal service, the federal level. Well, let me take a look into that. And I did. And I was fortunately hired, brought me to San Antonio as a federal probation officer, covered all the Del Rio sector area. And I learned the U.S. court system, the federal sentencing guidelines.
Which is complex.
It's very complex. You're talking now assistant U.S. attorneys, defense attorneys, filing and answering objections, going to court, answering before a federal district judge. And again, I thought that was going to be my 20-year career. But part of being a federal probation officer is interviewing not just the defendant, but the agents, because a lot of them are very, very poor writers. And sometimes they left a lot of details out that for the sentencing guidelines, you needed those details to determine what direction the guideline was going to take you for either more or less time. And so I interviewed a lot of all the special agents, DEA, FBI, back then U.S. Customs, INS, and Secret Service, all these cases that we had, money laundering cases.
I'm gonna stop you real quick, okay? For our listeners, watchers, voyeurs, call it what it is and get it out there right now. Because let's just call it what it is. The FBI, and I know a lot of FBI agents out there, God love you. But admit it, were the FBI guys, when you would call the FBI agents the ones that didn't maybe put enough detail in there, were they not the ones that got a little more butthurt than the other ones?
Well, and this is, I'm glad you brought this up, and let me tell you why. There was very rare cases that the FBI was the case agent, or in other words, that they were the case. It was a DEA case, it was a U.S. Custom case, then that FBI would attach themselves to it. And guess who did the press conference? The FBI.
Oh,
did.
yeah, okay.
But they weren't the case agent.
Okay.
Today we captured.
I have and I'll tell you this because it just came to mind. I have this picture. I did a big corruption case of a U.S. Border Patrol agent who was corrupt in that area, in El Paso, New Mexico area, and FBI, attached themselves. But I was a case agent, and there's a picture that I show where I'm walking him to jail in El Paso, and FBI. I always kid around with this picture when I do these presentations because there's always an FBI agent in the audience, and there's an FBI agent in the picture behind carrying my bag.
That's awesome.
And I always ask people, does anybody tell me what's kind of strange about this photo? but they're very helpful. I'll tell you I was impressed. But if I needed air support,
Yep.
Boom, 5 minutes, you got air. FBI.
And
I had to go through paperwork in my own agency. I had to do. Can I get my super? Get the ASAC. It's too late. I'd call FBI. You need them? Okay, they're up. Or I needed
Trace.
show money. We had to do some money for an extortion case, and literally the GS, the group supervisor, turns in his office. He has a little drawer locked. He's got $25,000. How much you need? We only need like $7,000. Here you go, $7,000 signed right here. And I'm like, for DHS to do that, it would take an act of Congress to do it. So that's why I like the FBI that way. But other we have other issues right now.
Yeah.
That we're not going to get into. But so because of the interviews, I said, you know what, I want to do what they do.
Yeah.
And I applied to be a U.S. Customs Special Agent. I got hired, and then I came in through that weird merger when this agency called the Department of Homeland Security was created. And I was there during the growing pains of DHS, where U.S. Customs Special Agents were merged with INS, Immigration and Naturalization Service Special Agents, and became ICE. And then we went into this identity crisis because every time you said immigration and nobody heard the rest part of it. Well, it was immigration and customs. We still did a lot of customs work, and a lot of people don't know what they did. We did a lot of money laundering. Everything that touched the nexus on the border, we investigated. Child exploitation, by the way, is a U.S. Customs jurisdiction. Money laundering, Bank Secrecy Act, those type of bulk cash smuggling, arms trafficking, everything is trafficking and smuggling, of course, commercial fraud, artifact investigation of the missing of artifacts in museums. We've been able to recover incredible parts that are stolen around the world. When I worked in Spain, we were recovering an original letter from Christopher Columbus from New York, trying to get it back to.
Oh wow!
I mean,
that's cool.
I mean, this is cool stuff, right? And then of course you hear the IPR, the fake Gucci bag and that. But when you look at counterfeit, a lot of people think of that counterfeit, and yes, we do deal with that, but we also deal with counterfeit pharmaceuticals, counterfeit toothpaste, counterfeit cotton T-shirts. Think that you would never know about that people are trying to get these cotton T-shirts, and you put it on and you're allergic to whatever it has in there. It's not 100% cotton. So there's a lot of fraud coming through those ports of entry. So I get in and I get El Paso. I get lucky to go back to El Paso, Texas. And because I'm from there, I have a great advantage. I know the judges. I know the courts. I know the city. I know both Juarez and El Paso. And so the sources and the interviews and all that, it becomes very natural to me to do my work. And of course, it was all narcotics. Initially, you just get into a narcotics conspiracy investigation group and start taking down dope, plenty of it. And so I know now that we see these huge seizures of fentanyl happening, and I always tell people, listen, the seizures are great, but when you see the record number of seizures go up, we knew that we were getting our asses handed to us. That's not good. When the seizures were down, we were doing a decent job. It's not the other way around. People think that when the seizures are up, hey, we're taking everything down. Actually, it's quite the opposite. That means that we're only getting about 10, 15%. But because we see the number of seizures increase, that means it's prevalent. It's so easy that we're grabbing them, and it's not a good thing. And so that's what's happening now with the fentanyl and the meth, that we see these huge seizures, which I welcome them. They're great seizures. It's great. But you can't ignore the fact that we're losing 85% of it coming into the country.
Easier to catch fish when the floodgates wide open.
Exactly. So that's exactly it. That's the theory behind it. And it's hard for people to understand that. They think that it's the other way around. And so I did narcotics and then got thrown
Working
in.
Mostly like sources or wiretaps?
Wiretaps. Sources. I did wiretaps. I did sources. A lot of sources.
When you say sources, are you talking about like CIs?
CIs, confidential informants.
Human intelligence.
Yes, a lot of it. Controlled deliveries. It was fun. Yeah. We're having a lot of fun.
I can imagine.
A lot of fun on the field. And I was proud to be a hardworking agent, one that produced, one that liked to be out there and actually get some work done and work the sources. I used to put a lot of hits on the systems in the ports of entry. So I go by and drive what looked to be a stash house, and I had some intelligence or information that could be possibly a stash house. So whatever vehicle was parked there, I put a hit on it, and I would forget about it. I put a hit on it. The special instructions will contact Special Agent Avila, something at the port of entry, right? And then 2-3 months later, I get a call out of the blue, and they hated me for this because they're like, "Hey, we got a Volkswagen Bug here. It's loaded with 250 pounds of marijuana." I'm like, what are you talking about? What? Yeah, it's a hit here. It says contact Special Agent Avila. Oh, it was a car that was parked at the stash house that I had put in months before. So now I have to respond to it. It was an addition to my regular duty cases. So I had to take another agent, and they're like, Victor, why do you stop putting these hits? But hey, I like working, right? I like to work. So we did a lot of that. And then one day out of the blue, about 3 years into it, I get a notice from my supervisor, says, you're going to a human smuggling, human trafficking group. Boy, man, I went kicking and screaming. I didn't know much about the human smuggling and human trafficking, just a little bit about what they had trained us at the academy. And then that was kind of seen like the stepchild. There was a big conflict between U.S. Customs and INS. The customs people didn't want to do immigration work. The immigration people didn't want to do customs work. And my supervisor says, Victor, you have to learn this. Just go do it. Yeah. And I did. And I actually ended up being and leading the human trafficking task force in El Paso, and became a subject matter expert in human trafficking. They trained me hard for about a year all over the country, going to these conferences. And then I started working the cases. Now I was out there looking for the exploitation, the women and children that are being trafficked for mostly sexual exploitation. I did work some forced labor cases as well, where they'll hire mostly an illegal and have them work at their house. I had one that worked at a house for years, an affluent family, and just had her living in I call it the basement, but it was like the dungeon. And she was responsible for everything in that house, to clean it, to cook, to set up the parties with no pay.
Wow.
A slave, right? A modern day slavery.
Slave, yeah.
So I worked those cases, and then I did some human smuggling. And then I did the Border Patrol corruption case. That got me my name mentioned around the office. And
for our listeners, we have a lot of non-law enforcement listeners. Would you share, and even with me, not just our listeners, the difference? A lot of people think smuggling and trafficking are the same exact thing, and there is a difference, right?
It's a huge difference. And thanks for bringing that up, because that's one of my pet peeves. What you're seeing right now, and I'll compare it to what you see right now with the human smuggling is versus trafficking. Smuggling is a one-time venture where the person, the illegal, pays, in this case, the cartel, to get introduced into the country, and that's the end of that.
So that's where our listener sees the 18-wheeler with 50.
Correct. That's smuggling.
Poor.
That's
women
all
and children.
smuggling. That's all smuggling. None of that is trafficking. And you do hear the term trafficking in the news, and it's not. It really is not. It's really a completely different crime. That's smuggling, as horrific as it is, but it's still smuggling.
Right.
Whether it's in the back of a pickup truck or a U-Haul or all this, that's smuggling.
Money paid to a coyote.
And once you're in, it's over. The contract is over. The trafficking is the exploitation of that person for continued exploitation, usually for the sex trade or forced labor. They have a lot of illegals working at farms and factories, and of course the women and children being prostituted against their will. And there has to be an element for human trafficking to exist. So you have to have force, fraud, or coercion to exist, unless you're a minor. And so those are the cases that I concentrated. But I also did a lot of smuggling, because you in El Paso, you can't avoid the smuggling.
Right.
We got illegals in hotel rooms all the time. I mean, we did a case, and I'll tell you really quickly. We hit a motel, like 18 illegals. The smuggler was out of El Salvador. It wasn't my case. I was just an agent assigned to the group. We're working it. They're interviewing the subject, and one of the ladies, one of the illegals, is in the tank, while Border Patrol would help us process them, because we suck at processing. The special agents, we're supposed to know how, and we do know, but we're slow. And so we would call BP to help us process. And then this lady tells me, he has my child. In Spanish, she's telling me he has my daughter. And I go up to her and I said, what are you talking about? There was no children in the hotel room. He says, no, I gave him my daughter. He knows where my daughter's at. So I called the guys down. I said, let me talk to this guy. And we interview him, different tactic, and to get a little bit more information. And sure enough, he gives us an address in El Paso. That same night, we suit up, hit it, and discover 18 kids.
Holy shit.
In this house with 4 people, 4 adults, that none of them are the next of kin. They're including her 18-month-old daughter.
Golly.
So then all of a sudden we're like, what the heck? I remember going into the house. I get chills because I remember going into the house, and we go in there and boom, 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 clearing house. And then there's a bunch of kids from 18 months to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old kids in this really small house. And we had cleared it, and I'm, tactics, right? And I have my partner, we're going the hallway, and the very last bedroom, we're shouting in Spanish, policía, policía, all this stuff. And we're thinking it's already clear in our mind, which is not clear until it's clear. The last bedroom, there's a lady sitting on the bed with a child, never said a word. And I come in already thinking it's cleared when it's not. And I remember kind of going off on her and yelling, I almost shot you. Can't you hear us telling police? But she was just shocked. But so now we have to rescue these kids. We don't know where their parents are at. CPS gets involved.
Collateral or given up for collateral?
They're so all of the above. Sometimes and I'm going to bring it to what's happening right now. The parent will give it up to the smuggler willingly. I never understood that, but they do. Sometimes they're taken by force. Sometimes they're taken whether they ask you or not. And they'll say, we're gonna use the child to get you in. You'll get in. We'll smuggle you, and then we'll reunite you with your child. And that doesn't happen all the time. And guess what's happening right now? So think of the 18 that we just had that one day. This was years ago. Well, now times 25,000. Well, now you got a problem, a huge problem of detention of facilities. These are kids, and so this is what the open border has caused. And so I worked those cases. Then my Mexico assignment came through there. There was an opportunity to go work at the U.S. consulate in Mexico, in Juarez, on the other side of El Paso, Texas. And the brand new U.S. consulate, this is 2007, 2008, was being built, and it wasn't finished yet. So ICE was housed with DEA at a private building. And the private building had architects, and what is a private building?
Just like a private business. Private
building business, yeah. And that's where ICE and DEA were housed. And when I started doing my TDY there, one day there's a dead body in the front of the building with a sign for DEA. Like the bad guys knew that DEA and ICE were housed in there. I mean, it was all over. I mean, when I was there, that city, Ciudad Juarez, was the most dangerous city in the world with 350 homicides a month. A month. So divide that by 30. How many is that a day? That's over 10 a day, right? Murders.
How many people did Juarez have at that point in time? Population.
It went drastically, dropped from 2 million to like 1.5.
Yeah, they were killing them all apparently.
Well, and people left. They were fleeing.
God.
A lot of them were fleeing to the U.S. and others were fleeing back to the Juarez is known for bringing a lot of people because of the factory industry there to come and work. You have the twin plants, and
historically, it was kind of known as a staging area to enter the U.S. I mean, it was
correct.
Yeah,
and also at that time there was the missing women's. There was over 300 missing women, all between the ages of about 16 to 22. And to this day, they've never been solved. We used to have these big intel meetings to go through the theories of who is taking these women, and they would
how many you think?
Over 300, and they would find them dead in an empty lot in Ciudad Juarez, which they end up giving it a name, Elote Bravo, and you could go dump a body. So then it got to the point where if it was the occult, if it was a cartel, if it was the police, if whoever it was that was killing these girls, then it was anybody else. If you wanted to get rid of your girlfriend, easy. You pay somebody $100, they'll kill her and go throw her in that desert, and you would never know.
Which
they would get
blurs
lumped
the
in,
original investigation.
which then all of a sudden you have no idea. I got my girlfriend pregnant. My wife's gonna find out. Kill her, get rid of her. A lot of those crimes from the U.S. will take them to Mexico and get rid of them there. So a lot of that was going on at that time. So you could imagine the intensity of working there. I would go and drop off my G-Ride at the port of entry. They would pick me up in an armored vehicle and then work all day till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, drop me off at the port of entry and do it all over again. And while I was doing that, there was an opportunity to go to the U.S. Embassy to work a case. And I had never been to Mexico City. And I asked my boss, hey, let me go. I really want to go to Mexico City. I'd never been there. I had a really close friend of mine, the DEA agent that was already stationed there. And I really wanted to go. Says, yeah, go take care of the meeting. And I did. And I got shown around and I fell in love with Mexico City. I said, I could do this. I talked to my wife about possibly coming and moving there. And there was a position, stars align in your career sometimes. And it did. The position was open. I was offered the position. I actually ended up finishing my temporary duty in Mexico City, and then started the process. And before you know it, my family and I moved from El Paso, Texas to Mexico City.
Wow.
It's like moving from Jefferson
to Austin.
More or less.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And so it was
cool experience for your family initially.
Yeah. So it's I kid around. I say the 252 reasons why we did it. A lot of it is I was born and raised in El Paso. I didn't get on an airplane until I was 17 years old. Never traveled much as a kid. Never went anywhere but that region.
Yeah. And
I didn't want my kids to do that. I wanted my kids to see the world. I wanted them to know that there's a world outside of El Paso, Texas. And so it was conscious. I mean, my wife was a very successful pharmaceutical sales. She left her job at the top of her game. But it wasn't about that. We sold our house. We said, let's go do this for a lot of those reasons.
That's dedication by your spouse. That's cool.
Yeah. I talk about a lot of her in the book, and I wanted that for my kids. Financially, you make a little bit more money because, first of all, the cost of living in Mexico is very affordable. I was basically living off of one check instead of two. My wife eventually started working at the U.S. Embassy as a background investigator. So
she completely gave up her career.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she did. She got trained and became a background investigator there at the U.S. Embassy,
nice.
Working for the State Department as a contractor, which I'll tell you how that comes in with the story. But
what's your wife's name?
Claudia.
Janet Owen, true woman right there. Training tips for my wife. Read the book, Janet. Shout out.
You'll read a lot about her and my family in there, because when I wrote the book, it's not like it just comes out, right? Your family, because
that's phenomenal.
They're an intricate part of my career, basically.
Yeah.
You guys know in law enforcement, you miss a lot of birthdays, you miss a lot of events, you're not there. And so she understood what I didn't know is that my career in Mexico was going to be the most I ever worked in my life. I mean, you talk about not being home. Sometimes 2 or 3 days out of the month I was home. And I was traveling a lot. I was taking down a lot of human traffickers, drug traffickers. I was in charge of the Global Trafficking in Persons Initiative, money laundering, looking for fugitives, man, you name it. I mean, we were doing some good work in Mexico, which unfortunately that coordination between the Mexican government and U.S. right now doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Back then we had a lot of free access to the government. And I mean, I flew with the Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General of Mexico to Washington, D.C. and for these meetings and coordinations. They were passing a federal human trafficking law back then, so we helped them with that. They wanted to get these cases arrested. We did. I mean, Mexico has a lot of human traffickers bringing a lot of the victims to the U.S. and exploiting them in New York, Houston, all over the U.S., Miami.
So my wife won't let me let this down if I don't ask this question. She's got a Hispanic background. Her family's from Chihuahua. Mm-hmm. And so how different was the culture from El Paso to Mexico City?
Completely different. Yeah. Completely different. And my family's from Chihuahua. My mom's side of the family's there. And it's the food is different, but it's great. And what I loved about my family is that we were able to assimilate and acclimate to that. The embassy still served lunch at 11:30 or 12 like they do here in the U.S., but no one ate lunch at that time. There were still people fighting that and would want to have lunch at 12, but lunch in Mexico is at 2:00. And it goes for 3-4 hours. I mean,
wow.
I mean, these meetings. You want to go have lunch? Yeah, it starts at 2 or 3, and I'd be home at 8. That was lunch
with drinks.
Yeah, maybe nobody knows. But so it was an enormous amount of work. What we had, the investigations we had going on the ground there, plus the collateral duties. And I started working very closely with New York. New York, all of a sudden, was very. They were happy because they had a lot of human trafficking cases linked to Mexico, and
was that because of the sweatshops and the industry?
Yeah, and a lot of the prostitution,
okay.
A lot. Also, Chinese smuggling cases for forced labor. And when I came in, I paid attention to them. I said, "Let's work these cases." And they're like, "Oh, what? We've been trying to get somebody in Mexico to listen to us." So before you know it, I was working a lot of cases with New York, and we started taking some good cases down. We did a great Chinese smuggling case from China, Mexico to New York, took the organizations in Mexico and New York down almost simultaneously.
Wow.
It was a lot of good work, but it neglected my family.
Yeah.
And I talk about it in the book where it's hard for me to, I hated the fact that I neglected the family, but I still love going to work at the same time. It was a weird feeling because even when I was home, I wasn't really there. I was on the phone all the time, text, email, well, maybe not text. I don't know what BlackBerry, whatever it was back then.
Yeah,
a lot of push to talk radio, and so that really occupied my time. I missed a lot of what my kids did in Mexico. As a matter of fact, my wife, if I was going to be home for a weekend, and I said, "What do you got this weekend?" I said, "I have nothing. I want to do nothing." She's not. We're going to the beach. And she would force it. She'd book something to one of the beaches and said, "Let's just go spend 2 days over there to decompress." And I'm glad that we were able to do that because if not, I would have done nothing in Mexico other than just work.
Well, and when you're hitting licks like you were and knocking down big cases, it's a little addictive.
Very.
And you want to get another lick after you get a big takedown or a big bust. That adrenaline gets a little bit addictive, and you can get not intentionally not taking care of your family, but you can accidentally get pretty addicted to the adrenaline rush of getting a big lick here. We just took down this group. We just seized this much money or this much.
I remember even your body reacts to that. I was on very little sleep all this time, 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours sleep was great night for me. And I'm a sleeper. I love to sleep, and your body gets used to that that type of cycle. And but I loved it. I still did. One of the times we came back from Cancun, we literally landed at the airport in Mexico City. My family went to our apartment, and I went to the police department, to their federal police headquarters to take down a guy, and didn't get back home till 2 days later. I mean, stuff like that would happen all the time. And And so that was the course, right? In Mexico City. This is now 2009, 2010. And then going into 2011, I had promised my wife I'm going to try to slow it down, especially with the trip. She already had got to a point, all right, that's enough. I mean, one thing is to be comprehensive and supportive, but she's like, what's going on now? Now we're at a different phase here where your kids don't even recognize you. My kids used to ask me, what are you doing here? What are you doing at home, Dad?
Oh, gosh.
And it doesn't feel good when your kids ask you, what are you doing there? And I said, okay, I'm going to do everything I can, stop traveling. It wasn't travel because I want people to always traveling is having a good time. No, it's because the cases would take you there, right? Central America and U.S. and South America. And but it almost seems like I did it on purpose because 2011 came across and I was all over the place. I went to Denver, New York, Guatemala, Panama. And my wife's like, all right, are you doing this on purpose? I said, I'm not. I promise you. It's just, it almost seems like.
This is what slowing down looks like, really?
Yeah, it was hard to, so I started getting a lot of the pressure at home. And then February 15th comes around. And so I'll tell you the story. And the week before the shooting happened on Tuesday, February 15th, 2011. The week before, I was in Denver. I was working a Afghan smuggling case. A
Can we
group.
pause 2 seconds?
Yeah, sure.
So you've mentioned Afghan smuggling, China.
Mm-hmm.
Again, speaking to our listeners that are not law enforcement, you know, a lot of times, and we've talked about it earlier in an episode with a Border Patrol agent, but it's so important in the political climate now, and the news only reports the version that they want. A lot of people think that immigration is people coming over to get a better life, or, you know, seasonally to working on crops. And it's so much.
And then it's just South Americans.
It's so much bigger than that.
And it's not just Mexicans either. That's another thing you just hear. Well, it's just Mexicans and Central Americans.
But it's, you've mentioned China, and I heard a statistic, and it may have been from one of our guests, that last year alone there was 162 different countries were identified crossing the border, whether it's Russians, Chinese, North Koreans. They're not coming here to.
Well, that's the problem. We don't know what they're coming here for. And we call them SIA, Special Interest Aliens, because I interviewed them at the detention facilities in Mexico City, people from Bangladesh, Somalia, Yemen. And you're like, what the hell are you doing in Mexico? Because they knew that if they were in Mexico, they're as good as being in the U.S. It was a matter of just spending time there because the Mexican government is so corrupt. They would release them, which they're still doing now, release them with their immigration pass to travel within the country of Mexico, and says, you have to leave within 30 days. Well, of course, they're going to the northern border to our country. They're not going back to Central America or the other way. They're coming back here.
Yeah.
And so that threat has always been there. I'm talking about terrorism threat.
Yeah, but people from Iran and Russia aren't coming here to pick cantaloupes. I mean,
no. And those interviews with and I used to have the translators. It was very difficult. I'm a decent interrogator, and I could never get anything out of them. Once in a while, they would tell me they're going to New York. That's it. We didn't even know their true identity. We started doing iris scanning down in Guatemala and Panama. Wow. And teaching them down there, so when they came to Central America, to Mexico, we would know the identity, because they would have one identity down there, one in Mexico, and then one in the northern border. 3 different identities. We had no idea. By the way, all their birthdays was 1/1 different year, 1/1/80, 1/1/90. You know, 1/1/90 something, and so that's the threat. That was and that's been happening for years. So now we've caught them on the no-fly list. We've had over 200 in the last 2 years that we know about. And you're absolutely right. We don't know what they want. We don't know if they're forming cells within our country. And this is what the big national security issue is. It's beyond just the illegal immigration. And it's not just the Mexican Central Americans, because those are the ones that get the most coverage.
And if an American goes somewhere else, to another country, they have to do it legally.
Yep.
They have to assimilate. And they have to do it the right way. And we're not being insane by saying, just come here legally, and
I'm all for it.
You know, provide the concept of why you're coming. Yeah, I sidetracked you. Let's go to February.
No,
2011.
but I'm all for the legal immigration, and I'll say it now, I'm all for it. I want people to come here legally, and what's happening now is not happening. So we get back. I'm doing that Afghan case, Denver source. I mean, it was going really good, and it happened to be in Tucson, Arizona, the Thursday before, about 4 hours from El Paso, and I turned in the car, rented my own car, and drove to El Paso, surprised my parents, and I spent that weekend, that long weekend, with my family and friends and all my family there in El Paso, which is kind of eerie.
Yeah.
Kind of like, now that I go look back, it was crazy, the people that I saw, and I was kind of almost saying goodbye to them. I get back to Mexico City.
That's ominous.
Sunday night, Monday morning, like at 1 a.m, which is Valentine's Day, February 14th. I go to the office around 9 Monday morning, and my whole intention was to just stay in the office a whole week and do this thing called reports, because everything that we do, we have to write it down. And I had a lot of administrative work to do, a lot of admin stuff. And
the non-sexy side of law enforcement.
Yeah, that people don't you never see that a lot in the movies, but everything that we do, we have to write it down. And I had a lot of reports to do, and I had I still have it there in my home office, what I wrote down, the things to do list. I'm a big writer of lists, and I had this long list of things to do. And around noon, one of my coworkers tells me, "Hey, heads up, they're going to send you to Monterrey." And I flipped my top, man. I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about? I just got here, man. Why are they sending me?" He says, "I don't know. I heard your name in the morning meeting that they're going to send you and the TD wire." They refer to Agent Zapata as a TD wire, because Agent Zapata had just arrived the week before from the Laredo office working an arms trafficking case. And we had agents rotating that case on a 30, 60, 90-day TDY, temporary duty. And Jaime had just come in to replace another agent. And I said, all right, well, we'll see. And so we went to lunch, 2:00, come back about 3. And sure enough, my supervisor calls me and tells me, "Yeah, I need you to go to Monterrey and pick up some equipment from our ICE counterparts from the ICE office. They're going to meet you, and you're going to pick up some equipment from them and bring it back." And I said, "On like driving?" I mean, you got to understand, we had all this intel that prohibited us from driving on Highway 57. The U.S. ambassador had sent out an alert prohibiting any U.S. personnel from driving on that road for personal reasons or business reasons. You just couldn't be on there, because we knew that the Zetas controlled that corridor.
How far, for a visual, how far is Mexico City to Monterrey?
About a 10-hour drive. So it's far.
Wow.
It's far. I mean, I drove that highway many, many times. It's called highway, but think of it an interstate, right? And it's the toll road. It's supposed to be the safe road. And we drove that many times. That's how we escorted people out and their families. That's where we
look like 35,
30,
smaller than that, or
kind of 30, like 35, like
yeah.
35. 2 and 2.
And you've touched on this before, but in Mexico, armored vehicles are like Toyota Camrys.
Yes, there are a dime a dozen over there.
And so what would that look like on a typical day for you to drive in Mexico, kind of walk through that process?
In Mexico City, armored vehicles are very prevalent. It's not a big deal. You see details of security details all the time. Business people, who knows who they are, but they have a security detail. They'll have a lead vehicle, they'll have them in an armored vehicle, and then they'll have a security vehicle behind. You see that all the time.
Full armored convoys.
Convoys. And they're not politicians. They're just business people with money, but they don't want to be kidnapped.
Yeah. Daily, several times a day.
Daily, everywhere. That's normal. They have armored vehicle dealerships there. Escalades and real high-end cars. We had just received these 2009 Suburbans, really nice, well-made armored vehicles. And they were personally assigned to us. But the big difference from the States versus in Mexico is they wanted us in the G-Ride. You had to put your family in there every time you rode on there. So we used our G-Ride as our personal vehicle as well. That was allowed there because of the safety. Not cartel. I'm talking about just crime in general in Mexico City. So you won't get carjacked in a red light, or somebody try to gain access to you or kidnap you, because that happens a lot.
So when you and your wife and kids rolled to dinner, y'all would be in an armored
vehicle. And that's just, it's normal, right? And it shouldn't be normal. That's not because crazy. That's not known here in the U.S. That's when you see armored vehicles, you see a politician being escorted or something, right? A dignitary or something. There it's just regular people and us. I mean, we were diplomats, but they wanted us in those armored vehicles. And so the assignment comes in. I challenge it. I said, wait a minute, I've been hearing all this, and I get with the assistant attaché out of Monterrey, our ICE office over there, call him, and he says, yeah, man, they're having these scrimmages on the highway. The Zetas are having firefights with the Mexican police and the Mexican military. And I said, why the hell are we flying whatever they want? Let's just send it by helicopter or send it by diplomatic pouch, which is basically a U-Haul truck where we get our mail. And it's not secure in a sense. It's protected by diplomatic immunity. So if they can't search it, nobody could search it, and they send it that way. All that was denied, and they said, you got to keep in mind, I was never briefed, and this had been ongoing since December. And I was never part of the preview to the emails. I just was brought in at the very last minute. And that's very wrong in law enforcement. I wasn't part of the operational plan. There was no operational plan.
So on a typical op like this, there would be days of operational planning. You would be a part of it from day one, multiple briefs, multiple planning, multiple vehicles involved, and none of this shit is going on.
At minimum, I tell you, because I did it many, many times, especially on that highway. Either Mexican federal police, Mexican military, both sometimes, armored vehicles, 2 or 3, U.S. personnel, and then whatever we had. We had a convoy of 5, 6 vehicles every single time. So when they tell you at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're going to leave tomorrow morning, well, wait a minute. Even if I wanted to arrange this, I don't have enough time to do it, and they didn't allot me that time. And so I had my supervisor go into the office. They were behind closed doors, and asked the deputy attaché, who my friend nicknamed him Blue 52, because he looks like Peyton Manning. He literally looks like Peyton Manning, 6'5", and so he named him Blue 52. And I said, hey, go tell Blue 52 all this intel, right? And I write about it because I'll never forget that. It's a very small office, and I'm literally standing 5 feet from the door. My supervisor there, he knocks on the door. Blue 52 comes out, and my supervisor tells him, hey, this is what's going on. We're talking to so-and-so in Monterrey. And his words were, I'm not aware of any security concerns in Mexico. Well, the whole fucking country of Mexico is a security threat.
Yeah,
that's why you're not aware. What are you talking about? I mean,
and are you not getting the same emails and alerts that I am, their boss?
Right. And it's being ignored all the through the ambassador and the regional security office. And he says, I need that equipment by close of business day tomorrow. Turns around and goes into the office and closes the door. My supervisor looks at me and says, kind of shrugs his shoulders, says, all right, you got to make arrangements, man. So I do. At that point, I'm ordered. I get with Jaime Zapata. I meet Jaime for the first time, hit it off, exchange numbers. We had the push-to-talk Nextel radios. Remember those?
I like those.
Yeah, I love those, man. Those were our lifelines. I love those. And I had a box full of like disposable ones. So I said, I'll give you a clean one. He says, no, I have the one from work from Laredo, which we exchanged the code to get it working. And I said, come to my apartment 6:30 tomorrow morning, and we'll take off. And I call the guys from Monterrey. I said, all right, it's 10 hours. You drive 7 hours. I'll drive 3. They're like, no, you drive 7. So we're trying to make arrangements to where to meet. And Jaime gets there 6:30 in the morning, February 15th. I write a whole section about February 14th on there, which to me was a very special day because it ruined the plans with my wife. Yeah. And my wife, remember, I'm already at tense at home. And my wife had this whole thing at our favorite sushi restaurant. She had it all set up. And I called her and I said, I got to stay and work because I had all this stuff to do. Now I have to work this. And she was very upset. So what she did is she called all the food over to be taken over to the house. And my kids acted like the waiter and servers. That was awesome, man. It was an incredible experience. So I take off the next morning. I say my son was still asleep. I kiss my daughter goodbye, and she sees that I'm not wearing a suit because I'm in a polo shirt and jeans. And she says, are you going out of town? I said, no, I'm going to the office. And I lied to her. And she says, no, you're not wearing a suit. You always wear a suit when you go to the office. And I said, no, I'm going to be back today. I didn't want her to know or think that I was going to be gone again. And my whole intention was to be back the same day. So we take off. Jaime gets there. We take off. We're driving. I have my backpack. And in my backpack, I have my 2 issued guns, my Glock 19 and my SIG 229. And I told Jaime, I had him behind. I'm driving, and I have him right here below, right here next to me. And I even told Jaime the first stop that we did because these are gas guzzlers. These Suburbans weigh about almost 6 tons, and they guzzle gas like crazy. And so we have to stop every time we have the opportunity to fill up. And we do at the first gas station. We're already out on Highway 57. And it was real early in the morning. We gas up. I said, "You want anything to eat?" And he says, "No." And that's the first time I told him, "Hey, by the way," and this is the way I said, if the shit hits the fan, I got my 2 guns right here. So, okay.
By looking at these vehicles, is it obvious that you guys are federales or is it obvious that
Yes. The vehicle is very obvious. So now, outside of the city is very obvious. This vehicle looks different.
And you're all by yourself?
We're by ourselves. This vehicle looks like armored. It looks different. The windows are the braces or the trim.
So the Zetas are going to know that if something is up. You're either a dignitary, a politician. Something's up with this.
They know we're on that road. Let me tell you right now, before we even go further, they know that we're on that road. They knew we were on that road. I don't know who told them we were on the road, but they knew. Their intel might have told them. They control it. They control it so well. And this is where I talk a lot about the cartels. They're highly sophisticated. They have intel sometimes more than the police. And they got lookouts everywhere. They knew that we were driving on that highway, even on the way back. Remember, we crossed their area, and it did the exchange around 11:30 in the morning, which was my Suburban was blue, theirs was gold in color. We exchanged the box, a bunch of boxes. We throw them in the back. There was a little restaurant there. I asked Jaime, "Do you want to eat here?" It was about 11:30. The lady said she would make us some food. He says, "No, I want to eat at the Subway that we passed by there," which is a Subway that kind of like a truck stop area where there's a Church's Chicken, a Subway. And he's like, "Church's Chicken?" I said, "Yeah, you have everything you have in the U.S., just a little different." But he says, "I want some Subway." I said, "I will eat Subway." And we did the exchange, used the restroom, and then we literally headed right back. And I'm still driving. And something I didn't tell you guys last time, when this is the very first feeling when we're driving probably maybe less than an hour. And all of a sudden, after exchange, we're heading back south. And in the middle of the median, it's a 2-lane highway north, 2-lane south. We're going south. In the median, there's a federal police officer in a marked unit. Think of him as a Texas DPS trooper, right? With a long gun outside, standing in a 3-quarter position, just scanning traffic. So think of yourself driving on I-35 or wherever you live, I-20, whatever, and you see a police officer doing that. You're going to slow down. You're going to see what's going on. Well, not only us, but other people we're not the only ones. People are like, "What the hell is this guy doing?" And let me tell you, it scared the living shit out of me, man, when I passed by him, because I didn't understand what was going on. I have been through many detentions, checkpoints, legal, illegal, cartels, police, military. You learn to navigate through those. You learn to communicate and identify yourself and approach.
And I was off.
This guy was by himself. It was off. It was weird. And we slow down, and I see him, and he's looking at us, and we just kind of continue on and looking at him through the side mirrors. And I even told Jaime, I said, "What the hell is that guy doing there, man?" I couldn't understand it. And when you don't have a grasp of,
did he make?
He's not a checkpoint. He made eye contact.
Did he follow you whenever you drove by?
He was following the cars. He was doing this with his M4.
It's weird.
Very weird, very strange. And we're like, and I said, "You scared, man?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Me too, man. It scared me." So kind of forgot about him, and got to the Subway, which I'm very familiar with. Gas up there, have clean bathrooms. We ate outside. It was beautiful. It was 72 degrees on February 15th. And I told Jaime, this is one of the perks of living down here. It's beautiful weather. I told him this is San Diego weather. Talked a lot about, he shared throughout the whole time, him and I really connected, and he gave me his whole story and his life and his fiance and all the plans. He wanted to come to Mexico. I told him, "You got to brush up on your Spanish." And I really saw myself in him, because I saw an agent that was working. He got a call for a seizure, one of his. I said, "This is my kind of guy. He's a working agent." And he really wanted to do something different here. And
younger than you, older than you?
Younger than me. I was about 6 years older than him. But in the law enforcement, that's a lot of difference in experience. And so I told him how I did my career path and what I was planning, and we really hit it off. Big fisherman, barbecue guy from South Texas, and very likable guy. And now everybody I talked to, he was very, very liked by a lot of his colleagues and his family and friends. And so we get off. I literally throw him the key. I said, "All right, man, it's your time to help me drive. I'm gonna get on the BlackBerry." I was finishing up a human trafficking conference, looking for a fugitive. And I said, "I'm going to take advantage while you're driving and get some of this work done." I called the supervisor and gave him our 20, our location. I said, "We'll be hitting Mexico City about 7:00 p.m., which is rush hour in Mexico, between 7 and 9. And I told Jaime, when you get into the city in the outskirts, I'll let you pull over, man. Because he had never driven an armored vehicle, had never driven in Mexico City. And I wasn't going to do that to you. I'll take the car from there, because it's the nightmare traffic in Mexico City.
Well, and I imagine at 6 tons, that vehicle handles quite differently.
Very different. It accelerates differently. It brakes. It takes a lot longer to brake. It's just the handling. I said the open road actually will give you better, training. And we had no training. The training was by fire. That's
really.
Here's
keys. Go figure out how to drive it.
That's how I got it. I mean, now you have to go through mandatory training. Now a lot of things have changed. So we get to he's driving for about maybe less than 20 minutes, not less than half hour, when 2 SUVs pass us at a high rate of speed. And he gives me the heads up. I say, "Check it out." And I look up, and the second SUV has a long gun, so you could see it sticking from the middle of the seat.
Tune in next week for part 2.
A force off to the right shoulder, and we come to a complete stop, and about 8 of them come out and do a semicircle in front of us, of the Suburban, with long guns.
Where Victor shares that this journey is not about revenge, but a reckoning.
So I called the senators, I called the congressmen, I called everybody that I know. I said, "We got to do something about it." And we changed the law. We said, this cannot happen.
My bones don't lie, they're broken, but they still got fight. I'm only getting started. I'm only getting started. You set my fire, those flames are getting higher and higher. I'm only getting started. I'm only getting started. I'm only getting Scrape gravel from the palm of my hands, skin weathered from the wind and sand.